Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show, we ask the question, are Muslims active enough in the fight against Guantanamo?
After weeks of downplaying the number of Guantanamo prisoners on hunger strike, US officials have now stated over 100 of the 166 detainees are taking part in the protest. The detainees are protesting against their years of imprisonment without trial or charge, the conditions they are in, and the abuse they are receiving. Though this is a voluntary protest, hunger strikers are now being force-fed by a squad of military officers in riot gear, known as the Extreme Reaction Force. This in itself has been condemned and described as a form of abuse. The notorious US prison opened a decade ago as part of the war on terror. During his presidential campaign, President Barack Obama had promised to close the institution if he were to win the elections. 5 years into his presidency, Guantanamo remains open. While many international organizations are actively working on the plight of Guantanamo prisoners, this week's Islam and Life asks, are Muslims active enough in the fight against Guantanamo?
That's an important question. Are Muslims doing enough? Is the world doing enough against what is happening? Because at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with only Muslims fighting for Muslim dignity. It has to do with human being, it has to do with the human dignity. And what is happening today in Guantanamo, as much as what happened over the years there, is just unacceptable. The President Barack Obama was saying, and this was the promise before he was elected, that he was going to close it. It was against the dignity of human beings, and yet 5 years later we are still there. Not only we are talking about it, but what is happening there with detainees just going for a hunger strike and asking for their rights and to be heard, because some of them, and we know this today, are innocent and still jailed for no reasons except that today there is something which is the perception could be bad if the President of the United States or people are acting to free the prisoners and to put an end to what is happening there. So Muslims should be more informed. The people should know more about what is happening. Are we doing enough to change this situation? We listen to the promises of the past and now we are silent because there is no media coverage and not enough voices saying that this is simply unacceptable. So these are questions that we have to ask. What could be done? What should be done to change the situation? And to answer all these questions, I'm joined by former Guantanamo Bay detainee and founder of Cage Prisoners, Muazzam Beg. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I think that you know what is that you experience this lack of dignity and lack of respect towards you as a human being, towards you as a Muslim, and still what we heard 5 years ago is that we have to stop it, and it's not. So what do you think? How is your reaction when you look at what is happening now? What is your assessment? Why are we still dealing with such an unacceptable situation?
I remember that a couple of years ago I went to meet with the foreign ministries of several countries in Europe asking for them to take prisoners that had been cleared for release by the US but couldn't return to their countries for fear of torture. Ironically, this included Egyptians, Tunisians and Libyans who were afraid to go back to their countries. One of the statements that the people in those countries, in those European countries said, well, you know, these people are still quote-unquote dangerous terrorists. And I said, who told you this? He said, the United States government has been saying this for the past 10 years. And this is the problem, because in all of the talk that we've heard from Obama is that this is not good for our image, this is against our dignity and so forth. He's never said that these men are innocent. And now we know that the process of the law says that you are innocent until proven guilty. These people have been interrogated by the MI5, by the CIA, by the FBI, by the DIA, and all the military intelligences and law enforcement agencies, the most powerful ones in the world. They're the most vetted people on the planet, in fact. Yet still, after all of that, 11 years of that, they've never been charged with a crime and have never been tried, and they're not designated for trial by a military commission. The overwhelming majority have, as we said, the number is 86, have been cleared, according to the Bush administration, for return and release. The numbers of those who can and should be released, the largest numbers are Yemenis. And there's a problem because what do? Do they do with the Yemenis? They send them back to Yemen. Yemen's a volatile country. Whatever the situation is, that's the argument they give, is that, well, we can't send them back to Yemen because you don't know whether they could re-offend and so forth. And here's the problem, because they're not looking at them as human beings. They're looking at them as
when you say they are not looking.
The United States, definitely the United States administration. The British government has, with all of its involvement in complicity in torture, at least it did negotiate the return of almost all the British prisoners. There's one still left, Shakir Amr al-Madani, who's a British resident. His wife is British. His children are British, born and raised here. They're in London. Faris, the youngest son, has never seen his father, and he's 11 years old. So we've got all of this happening.
But it is known about him, for example, that
yes,
he is innocent.
Yeah, of course. And of course, the innocence here, the issue that I was talking about, how does one determine the innocence? You're not supposed to fight in the court of law and say, I'm innocent.
And to prove
it's up to the accusers to prove. The onus is upon them to say that you're guilty of a crime. After 11 years, these people have served the equivalent of a 22-year sentence, a life sentence. Had they been charged and convicted, they would have served their crime, the time by now. The problem is they've never even been charged. So when the president of the most powerful country in the world says that I want to close it, and he said it now again, he's only saying it because these people are hunger striking, because they're at this point where they're forcing food into them. They're forcing a tube into their noses. They're tying their hands, tying their legs, and tying their heads in order to get this tube into the nose and pumping liquid food. So he's saying all of these things because he knows that the pressure now is on. For the past 11 years, the United States government, and sadly the people there, have been quite happy with Guantanamo.
So that's how is it possible for this situation to carry on like this? How would you explain, for example? Because by your explanation, we can understand which kind of strategy we need to have when we are asking, should the Muslims do more? Is why, after 5 years, when the President Barack Obama, when he was elected against, and directing his talk against the Bush policy, what Guantanamo was something which is so important in his policy, and then he didn't stop. Why? How would you explain this to let us understand what could be done in order to change that?
What you had is that there was a block, and has been a block, of transfers from Congress. So Obama expressed this clearly that he wanted to do that, but whether he's powerless or whether he's unwilling or a little bit of both has something to do with Congress. Now there are people within Congress, and it's ironic. People like Congressman Peter King, who ordered these McCarthy-style trials, or wanted these McCarthy-style inquisitions on the Muslim community. He was somebody who supported the IRA right through. He campaigned for IRA prisons. He campaigned for Jerry Conlon, who, of course, ironically is a great advocate against Guantanamo. Jerry Conlon is this man who was in prison for 16 years and then found to be innocent in the United Kingdom. And so at that time, you had the IRA hunger strikers. He was supporting them all. He was supporting Bobby Sands and all of those people. The irony is now, when it comes to Islam, he's lost any principle at all about people being detained without charge or trial and so forth. So it's people like him who are leading the charge against Guantanamo and saying, well, let's keep these people held in. They are enemies. The argument you constantly hear is that these people are dangerous, these people are terrorists, these people are murderers. It's the same argument that Bush and Rumsfeld used to give,
exactly.
without any evidence at all. And you see the problem with us as individuals, why are not we able to move the conversation, is because somebody of stature, somebody of position, has to be honest and stand up and discipline and say, these men are innocent. And once somebody says that, that will open the door. One of the things, Tariq, is I would say, is that there have been more releases by Bush than there have been by Obama of Guantanamo prisoners. The last prisoners to be released were to El Salvador, two Uyghurs, or from China, as they say, over a year and a half ago. After that, nobody's been released.
But this is the tricky dimension of the whole story, because if you look at the figures and the facts under the current Obama administration, less prisoners being freed, more drones in the Middle East,
Absolutely.
more. It's just from behind the scene is even worse when it comes to figures.
Absolutely.
And when you deal with people at ACLU in the States, they say no, that's not working. This is not what we are expecting.
Yeah.
On the other side, I was in the United States. I was talking about Guantanamo. I was trying to inform the people. And then what I got, and this is where I want you to start to tell us what you think should be done, I saw American citizens, Muslims, and some of them non-Muslims, people of other faiths, being scared. It's as if under Obama's administration, the people are just scared. They don't want to talk about this. It's as if we are monitored, and then if you take a stand on this, you can are going to pay the price on something else.
Yeah.
So what should be done?
Well, I think you've hit on something here which is symptomatic of what's happening right across the board. Whether you're talking about people being stopped and questioned at ports of entry and exit under Schedule 7 of the Anti-Terrorism Act here in the United Kingdom, or the worst case scenario, Guantanamo Bay or the secret detention sites. Fear is a big factor. Fear is a terribly big factor. It frightens people from being able to speak about their case for fear of the state and the state repression. And of course, you know this, and we in the Muslim world know this. The Muslim world rose up against that. Right across Arab countries, they rose up against decades and decades of this. So while you've got Muslim countries, or countries where the Arabs at least in the spring started to rise up against that sort of fear, that sort of fear is being implemented within the very countries that we live in, where we never imagined this. I was born and raised in the United Kingdom. I went to a Jewish school as a child. We had friends all across the board. We were never, our parents came here because of all those freedoms. And yet now those freedoms are slowly, drip by drip by drip, being taken away. And the fear factor is being placed upon us. Don't talk. Don't be representative of yourself. Don't stand up for ideals and morals. Don't speak out against foreign policy. If you do, the price that you pay will not be worth it. So what's happening is that people are becoming more and more marginalized. And we've had this discussion quite often, but at least on Guantanamo, people could say, a few months ago, I met with the former Undersecretary for Homeland Security of the United States. He was very close with Bush. And he has just produced a report called under the Task Force on Detainee Treatment, saying very clearly that what happened in Guantanamo was undisputably torture. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But even despite this fact, people will say, well, that's them, let's not get involved. If we get involved, then our name may be blacklisted. We might get put on one of those lists. We might be stopped at ports of entry and exit. So, like any struggle for justice requires some sacrifice, and people are still
and some courage. But knowing the state of affairs now, and Adam, you yourself, you came back from there, you started the work, you wrote a book, and then you have this cage prisoner organization trying to make it clear that things are happening, that we have to be vocal, that we have to in fact, it's a question of dignity, and it's a question of a dignified presence in the West and everywhere. Sure. It's not about, once again, it's not a Muslim business. It's about human dignity. You know that the people could be scared, that there is a great deal of fear now in our society. What are the steps that we can take to make, for example, Guantanamo, because we are talking about this now, known and once again because the people know, but they passively know what is happening and nothing is done. So how can we change that?
On the one hand, I guess we can say, although Guantanamo is still open, we can say we have the US president on our side in this matter. At least in public, he said twice that he wants to close the place down, that it's no good for their public image, that it's a recruiting sergeant for terrorism, and all those sorts of things. So in a sense, he's on our side. He's calling for what we're calling for. But it doesn't make any sense because the dots are not joining up. Everybody almost, I've never met any politician, and I've met many around the world who've ever tried to justify Guantanamo. The only ones who try to justify it are the right-wing hacks who are very few and far between now in terms of their ideas. Guantanamo is simply, untenable. But what is that gap? Why is there this great fear?
Yes.
And Obama often panders to the Republicans, to the right wing, in order to try to get some sort of cross-party agreement. And when it comes to, here's the sad part. The sad part is that you asked, what are the Muslims doing? Well, as individuals, we can try as much as we can. But we know that our governments, particularly in the countries that were involved in the Arab Spring before that, were sending over intelligence officers to interrogate these men while they were being tortured. Gaddafi sent them, Bin Ali sent them, Mubarak sent them, Bashar sent them. All of these people were completely involved in the rendition programs, in the torture programs, and they were working with them. So, now, for example, we spoke about the Yemenis. We spoke about, there are also some Libyans still there, there's some Tunisians still there, some Pakistanis still there. There are numbers from all over the world still there. And so what are the Muslim countries doing? What are these people who now have newfound liberation right across the Arab world? We are asking them, and they have been cooperative to some level, but they're not working hard enough. They're not, 11 years is just too much. In the end, everybody says that the decision is down to Obama. I've met with the ministers over here who've said exactly the same thing. We are doing everything to get back Shakir Amr to the United Kingdom. But the decision is Obama's. Is it? Is it Obama's decision? Or if you applied a little bit more pressure for a principle, and here it's about justice and morals. If you held on to this principle and said, we the British government, we the Tunisian government, we the Libyan government are on a principle here that this man should not be tortured.
But you think it's at the governmental level that it has to be done? Do you think that, because once again, if you talk to people in Tunisia or in Egypt, they would say, as they said on many other issues, and for example, even in Palestine, they would say, we have enough to do
enough for our own problems.
For our own problems, so we can't do this. Now, what you are saying is that they can push, and that's for sure, if voices are coming from there.
The sad part of our country still, I think, they have this colonialist mentality. If everybody gets on board and everybody starts doing it, say, well, we'll do it too, then we'll do it. But we can't be pioneers in this. We can't be leaders in this. We can't say, okay, we will take the lead on a matter of principle. For one man, let alone 5 or 6, or, as I said, Yemen has 80-odd prisoners that they still can't get back over to Yemen. Kuwait has 2. So there are allies in the war on terror that are still suffering this issue. These issues are discussed in the parliaments of Kuwait as much as they are anywhere else. But the pressure, the right pressure, if it was unified, if all of these countries got together and sent their ambassadors and their representatives to the United States and said clearly, we all, with one voice, want our people back. They have been cleared. They've never been charged with a crime. You don't want to charge them with a crime. Let them come back and we'll take care of them. And I think that this is what's really missing. In the end, because it's at such a high level, no amount of individuals on the street will be able to change this process. They're held in a dark dungeon that's outside the rule of law, which is called Guantanamo.
Yes, and add to this, because this is also something which was said just after the Boston attack, that as you have this, the more you have things that, and every 6 months we have a new controversy on attack or a terrorist attack, this is spreading this perception that we better keep it and don't do anything about it.
I mean, one is not connected to the other. It's like saying that we shouldn't release any prisoners at all in the world if another murder takes place. So if a murder takes place in Ohio, we shouldn't release anybody in Wisconsin because, let's just be safe. This way of operating, it doesn't make any sense, and most importantly, it's illegal. It's illegal under international law, it's illegal under Islamic law, it's illegal under common sense law. And I think what's happening here is that these people are paying the price. These prisoners are paying the price. But if you go to the Arab and the Muslim world, and I've been there to more countries I can imagine, the moment I tell them I'm a former Guantanamo prisoner, you can see their attitudes towards the United States of America. They've never been there, never went anywhere near it. And all they know is when you talk to them about Guantanamo, their vision is that it's a place that abuses you because you're a Muslim. They desecrate the Quran there. They strip, search you, they beat you, they torture you, they waterboard you, they force food into your stomach, they meet through these tubes. Everything that's sacred, they use as a weapon against you. And this is the perception. So Obama's right. It doesn't do anything for their image. but I don't think they really care about their image anymore.
Yes, just one thing. Would you say that today, with what happened with the hunger strikers and the way they were, would you say it's still torture? Would you say that today, when we now, as we are talking, we are still dealing with torture? Because what we heard from some in the United States, and even from some people who are activists, are saying, no, it's the principle of Guantanamo which is wrong, and people being detained and being innocent. Torture is not a real issue now.
Well, I think that this has already been answered by two of the most senior authorities. One is the United Nations Secretary General has already described what's taking place as now. The force feedings is torture. Okay. The force feeding has been described by the United Nations as torture now. And as I said to you in this report done by the Constitutional Project on Detainee Treatment, these former US ambassadors, and as I said, Asa Hutchinson, who's still a congressman now, very close to Bush, he said very clearly in this report, it's indisputable that torture took place in Guantanamo.
Took or still is because took is that something.
When
which
I say it took, I mean up until the period, because they produced the report just now. So everything from the beginning of Guantanamo up until now, they describe very clearly as torture. And the types of things they've described as torture: psychological, physical, of course, having no meaningful communication with your family, not being able to know what crime it is that they're holding you for, and of course the physical aspects. Because as we know, as anybody who survives torture, you can torture somebody for a period of half an hour, but it's going to stay with him for the rest of his life.
Just one final question, Mu'adham, about Muslims should do more, and we said it. Now, are there people of other faiths, non-Muslim organizations that are involved in this, and is this powerful? Do we have an international network of organizations? Is this happening?
Absolutely. Just as I was coming up here, there's a group called Anonymous who've said that their goal is to close Guantanamo, and between the 17th and the 20th, they will somehow get Guantanamo closed. I don't know how they're going to do that, but they said they're going to send emails and they're going to send lots of traffic and keep calling them non-stop. And so all of this stuff they're going to keep doing. There's support all across the board, no doubt about this. There are many non-Muslims supporting this.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. I think that your presence, your very presence with us is an important factor just to be able to speak about it, to say something about Guantanamo. The President Barack Obama said it's going to be closed, is still there, and as you were saying, we are dealing with lack of dignity, still torture, and people being forgotten in our current history. It's as if Guantanamo is not in our life, is not in our understanding of what is essential here, which is to campaign, to speak out, and to say this is against dignity. It's against and targeting the Muslims, that's true, but at the end it's very bad for the American policy and the American image in the Muslim majority countries, because this is something which is with other issues, but this is a very important point, and we still have to struggle and speak out against what is happening. Thank you for that. Well, that's all we have time for. Please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the shows you have seen, and here is the way to contact us.
Islam and Life welcomes your opinion. So please send us your suggestions as well as criticism on any of the shows you have seen or you would like to see. You can do all this by emailing us at islamandlife@presstv.co.uk. You can also be part of our online platform by joining our Facebook page, Islam and Life on Press TV, where you can share your thoughts with other Islam and Life fans, engage with debate and view past shows.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Mu'adham Beg. Thank you so much once again for being with us and for your input. And I hope to see you next week, inshallah.